Hey y'all, we have been talking for a little while now about congruent triangles. Triangles that are the same size and of course the same shape because they're triangles. We're going to talk now about what it means to be similar triangles. So similar means not the same, but it means it has some stuff in common. Um, you probably already have an understanding of what similar means. When it comes to triangles, um, triangles that are similar have two things. Number one, corresponding angles are congruent. And I'm going to use the symbols. Angles congruent. So that's the same as when they're congruent. Congruent triangles, the corresponding angles are congruent. So that's still the same when we have similar triangles. But when we have similar triangles, um, one triangle is going to be bigger than the other. And so the sides aren't going to be the same length. So we can't say the corresponding sides are equal because then they'd be congruent triangles. But what we do say is that corresponding sides are in proportion. Oops, sorry. Sorry about the sloppiness. Proportion means that if we take every side, so let's look at this first pair of triangles. If we take every side in this triangle and match it with the side that it corresponds to in this triangle, and we write the fractions, this side over this side, all three of those fractions are going to be equal. So proportion means equal fractions. And so one thing that we can do, knowing this about similar triangles, is we can always we can write equations and we can find something that's missing. We've done that a lot this year. So we can figure out which angles and which sides correspond by looking at the names of the triangles, just like we did with congruent triangles. So the first letter in each triangle means those angles correspond. The first two letters in each triangle means those two sides correspond. So I have some sides here labeled and we're trying to find a missing side. And so that missing side is CT. And so I'm going to figure out which side goes with it. So CT is my first two letters in this triangle. So it goes with CD, my first two letters in that triangle, CD. So I'm going to write this fraction. And I usually like to put the thing I'm looking for on top. So question mark over 126. And so I have these other sides labeled. So I'm going to check to make sure that they go together. So CU, that's my first and third letter, should go with CE, my first and third letter. And this is CE, it does. When I wrote my fraction, I wrote the top of my fraction in yellow from this triangle. So the top of my other fraction is going to come from the same triangle. So 22. And I'm going to divide that by 99, the other side it goes with. If I knew how long the other sides were, I could write their fraction too, and all three of them would be equal. But I don't need to do that right now. This is a proportion. We've solved proportions before, but as a reminder, you solve proportions by cross multiplying. I multiply the top of one side by the bottom of the other. So I'm going to do 99 times question mark and 126 times 22. And I'm going to multiply that. So I used my Desmos calculator. I got 2,772 for this multiplication. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 99. Those will cancel. I can do this division. And I got that my missing side is 28. So this side is 28. So I'm going to do a couple. Sometimes we don't need to know the triangles are similar. I'm telling you they're similar. We don't need to know the names. If I look at these two triangles, there's two here. I have a big one, and then I have the smaller one. And they're going to be similar, and I don't need to know the names. It's pretty clear here that this side that I'm missing, that's question mark, corresponds to this side. So I can write this fraction question mark over 27. side in my little triangle that corresponds to this big side. I know this side in the little triangle is 10, and it corresponds to this big side that's 15. Notice that the tops of my fractions were both measures that came from the smaller triangle. You want to be consistent. The numbers that you put on top should come from the same triangle. The numbers that you put on the bottom should come from the other triangle. And I can cross multiply this. 15 times question mark and 10 times 27. I'm multiplying the top of one fraction by the bottom of the other. And I can solve this. I'm going to pause here and solve this quick. So when I solved that proportion after I cross multiplied, I was able to find out that that missing side length is 18. It should make sense. So my answer should be smaller since that side came from the smaller triangle. It should be smaller than 27, and it is. And so we found the missing piece. So I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to have you try one. And then if you have questions as we're going through this, you should write your questions down on your notebook so that you can ask me when you get a chance, and so that you don't forget your question. So again, I can look at the names to know which matches because it's not quite so obvious. So I'm looking for question mark, that's TR. That's my last letter and my first letter. So I should match that with the last letter, first letter in my other triangle, CE or EC. So I like to put question mark on top. So then I'm going to put 130 on top of the other fraction so that the numbers that I put on top come from the same triangle. And so SR, those are my first two letters. It should match with CD. I have CD, that's 50. And now I can cross multiply. I'm going to do 50 times question mark and 130 times 70. And I'm going to pause here. I'm going to solve this up. You can try it yourself as well. So when I finish solving this, I end up finding that my missing side is 182. That seems really big, but when I go back and I look at this triangle, one of the sides was 130. And if you look, this one looks like it's longer. We're not 100% sure, but 182 would seem to make sense. So again, we matched up the sides that went together by looking at the names of the triangles. Because they're similar, and you can see that one is smaller than the other, so they're not congruent. So the sides aren't going to be the same length, so they're similar, so we can't just say they're equal. But when I write this fraction, the side here, TR, and the side in the other triangle, CE, that matches it, they correspond. When I write the fraction using their lengths, it's equal to the fraction of the other two sides that correspond. And again, I make sure that the numbers on top come from the same triangle and the numbers on the bottom come from the other triangle. So I want you to give this one a try. Use the names to figure out which sides go together and write your fractions and then solve your proportion. So what I want you to do right now is pause this video, use this picture, and answer this question. And when you're done, you can press play, and I'll wait a second here before I do that, and then I will have the solution, and you can check your answer. But you should definitely pause the video and try this one on your own first. It's okay if you get it wrong, nobody's going to know, and then you can check your answer. So there you go. There's my solution. Check to see if you got it right. If you got 52, good job. If you didn't, that's okay. That's why we practice. Check to see if you can find your mistake. If you can't, make sure you ask me for help. Make sure, again, you write down any questions that you might have about this, and make sure to ask me when you're done, and then you can do some practice. Make sure you're always checking your answers. When you get one wrong, please ask me for help. Good luck.